Alright, we're continuing to read Dallas Pimiento, Book 2. I'm Bronco 2. Kitchen drink. The kitchen drink, as opposed to the food court beverage, the garden hose gulp, or even the bathroom drink, was uniquely formulated to satisfy the hydration requirements of the seagoing tuna piece patrol. In their bottom-heavy canister-like vessels, they resembled nothing so much as jarred spiders bobbing up and down through the waves. Dallas Pimiento asked in vain his acquaintance Schottfeld what exactly this kitchen drink tasted like. "I do not know," said Schottfeld. "I have never been to sea." Nor had, to my knowledge, Mr. Pimiento. Thus it was on a yet wintry April morning, just after returning to my parcel chucking job after a good vacation, that I sent him off on a maritime mission. Of course, he didn't know it was I who was sending him. It was his immediate superior at the Loathe Procurement Ministry, Mr. Thorpe, who handed him his orders. In Pimento's absence, I and the ancient Mr. Gravel drove to Pimento's lodgings to examine them for signs of continued realism. "A depiction of you, Mr. Ashe," announced Gravel. I came out of the kitchen into the tiny nook in which the old man stood gazing at the portrait. It was true enough to life, I admitted, but what I objected to was a representation of me holding a bottle labeled kitchen drink. "That bastard!" I growled. "There," interjected Gravel, "in the reflection on the glass of the bottle." He pointed. "Some sort of creature. A severed head on a table. What could it mean?" I could not explain to Gravel what it was or what it meant. He was not privileged to know about the tunapis. Nor did I know what it was supposed to mean. A couple of days later, Pimiento returned. He duly reported, after which his report was passed through many hands until it reached my own. "Like unsweetened grape Kool-Aid," I read Pimento's words disgustedly. Of what value was this to me? I got on the phone with the lab. After discussing the matter at length, the head researcher and I agreed that the problem with the report was that we still didn't know what the fluid tasted like to the tunapis themselves. "Dallas," I greeted Pimiento as he stepped out of his car. I had been sitting on the front steps of his bungalow waiting for him. "Lance," he replied nervously. He had a can of orange soda in his hand. The place is a mess, I'm afraid." His lie was transparent. Broken doors. Cal Thursley and his lieutenant stood before the entrance to the disused ballroom on the ancient derelict ocean liner. "We need to get inside," thought Thursley in his methodical way, "but the doors are broken." "We need the mechanical ram," he determined after redundantly pushing at the doors. Mexner, the strongest among the men there gathered, had already applied all his weight to them. "Where's Wright and the new girl with the big ass?" Thursley asked. Sanford glanced at his fellow lieutenants. "I think they went on break," he said to Thursley. Thursley studied his watch. "They're not supposed to go on break for another hour," he groaned. "I could get the ram, sir," Mexner offered. "No," Thursley shook his head. "By contract, only those two knuckleheads are supposed to operate it. I don't want any trouble with the labor union on this trip." "Do we wait?" Sanford asked somberly. Thursley, experienced commander of a dozen such trips, decided. "No," he said. "We look for another way in." Ward, the youngest of the 6 men, wanted to object. He knew, from looking over the ship's blueprints, that there was no other way in. 3 weeks under Thursley's command, however, had finally taught him to keep his negativity to himself. With the others, he followed Thursley down the corridor to a custodian's closet. "Should be an access panel over here somewhere," said Thursley, kicking a box. "A crawl space, something." The lieutenants joined him in tearing through the accumulated junk. Ward, still out in the hall, put his head into the room. "Wright and that new girl are back," he announced. "About time," Thursley growled. He exited the room. "Right!" he barked at the giggling man approaching with his partner. "You and her go get the mechanical ram. I want these doors down now," Thursley pointed. Wright nodded casually. He and the girl with the big ass turned around to retrieve the necessary machinery from the team stores. "Stupid motherfucker," Wright complained in an undertone to his friend. "Always wanting something done." No time to catch your breath, agreed the girl. Walk up this concrete. Unlike the ancient pyramids of the Maya, the great monument of my twin triumphs over whistling and masturbatory guilt was built of concrete. No chance of the jungle reclaiming this structure. I had sprayed Roundup about its base. On the summit of this massive derivative pile, one will encounter the Temple of Improvisation, the entrance to which is situated so that the first rays of the sun each day will fall upon the feet of the grotesque and gargantuan stone idol I have had erected inside. This idol depicts the god of sequence, whose name is unwritable without the lost font of the dust-pecking birds. As the tour bus pulled into the parking lot across the ceremonial field laying out below the front face of the pyramid, I had just descended the 120 steps from the temple above. Seeing the tourists slowly making their way toward me, I pulled a fake mustache from my pocket and donned it as a disguise. Unbelievable, I declared to them as I passed. The amount of work put into it is simply staggering. Once our paths had crossed, I heard behind me the tour guide dishing out such misrepresentation and outright falsehood that I had to laugh. I sneezed as the mustache tickled my nostril cavities. I approached the bus. "You the driver?" I asked the tall, unhealthy-looking man leaning against the bus smoking a cigarette. "Yeah," he nodded. "I guess you've seen the pyramid before." "Nah, I won't set foot on pagan soil." "But you'll drop your cigarette butts on pagan gravel?" Before he could object, I had knocked him unconscious with the mason's trowel I had hidden up my sleeve. I was then permitted to enter the bus, where I hunted among the various purses and bags left in the seats. The turquoise vinyl one, that was the one I desperately needed to open. I could see the ragged line of the tourist through the tinted glass, extending my self-glorifying monument. I spilled out the contents of the purse on the seat. The wallet. Whose name would I find? Rooting amidst the credit cards and personal identification of Mindy Malenkov, I came across a small photograph of the Eiffel Tower. Gazing upon this image, I knew that my piddling pyramid would no longer suffice. Mostly out of fear. I don't believe in the supernatural anymore. That includes the Christian God, whom I was taught to worship as a child. Despite this, I still fear death. I no longer fear the grim retribution of hell or the infinite boredom of heaven, but I still fear my ultimate eternal non-existence. Thus, it is fear that motivates me to work as hard as I do on my art, be it the writing, the cartoons, the painting, or the guitar playing. I live in dread of having people after I die say to each other, "What a tragic waste of potential, my fellow mourner. He could have done so much, yet he chose to watch TV and languish in the obscurity of the rural South." I have already wasted so much time. My teens and early 20s were nothing but a void of TV, empty relationships, church-going, shoplifting, and alcoholism. People will probably still say I wasted my potential despite the amount of stuff I've done because of the absurd, abstract, and abysmally crafted nature of most of it. That too is caused by this fear of wasting time. I am not formally trained in anything. Everything I do is self-taught. It all comes out the way it comes out. I don't have time for planning, editing, or do-overs. It is my hope that the sheer volume of it makes up for its lack of polish, unity of conception, or breadth of vision. I know the necessary drawbacks to this method. I'm never going to make any money. I'm never going to be considered among those artists who express universality. I can live and die with that. All I really want is a little recognition. I'll take that recognition in the form of a few fans. Out of all the people on this planet, if I had just a couple of thousand that both liked and appreciated what I do, I would be happier than I am right now. I can't imagine at the moment the thrill of having a stranger approach me or get in touch with me and tell me how much he enjoyed something of mine. To have someone hear of me through the medium of one of my works would be the crowning achievement. As it is right now, people turn away in disgust. I have spoken before of how there must be something I'm doing wrong. There must be some secret signal that is absent in my work, something that would tell my potential audience that I'm okay to like. That being said, I still won't change what I do nor how I do it. Better to die knowing that I did exactly what I wanted to do, given what my circumstances allowed, than to have put on a costume and danced. Shifting the slippers. Benji's shifting of the slippers from their appointed cubbyhole outside the sanctum to a small table piled with otherworldly literature put more than one nose out of joint. The old viceroy, never one to indulge children, and certainly not ursine ones, in even minor matters, shoved the slippers back into a cubbyhole, the wrong one it turned out, and slapped Benji hard on the side of his head, cursing all the while as angrily as though he was dealing with a grown man blackly bent on the destruction of all that the otherworldlies held sacred. Benji ran away howling. Norma, one of the cult's spinster members, reined in the old man as best she could. "Calm down," she said firmly but quietly. The ritual of the dead earth was underway inside the sanctum. "They shouldn't allow those damn bears in here. I don't care if they are underprivileged," thundered the old viceroy. So he's a bigot too, thought Norma. After the ritual was over, those members present inside the sanctum filed out, turning to the left to retrieve their shoes. "My shoes are missing," Bert gasped. He got down on one knee and peered into all the cubbyholes. "My shoes are missing." His fellows in the elite circle of the cult's membership ignored his complaint. They were still emotionally elevated from the completion of the ritual. They gathered their shoes and put them on wordlessly. "My shoes are missing," Bert cried, getting to his feet. "Someone has stolen my shoes." The good feelings engendered by the ritual seemed to have dissipated in him quickly enough, faced with this relatively minor misfortune. The others finally seemed to take note of Burke's predicament and looked askance at him, as if he was a 10-year-old child that had wet his pants. Norma and the viceroy, taking their turns as functionaries during the ritual, were charged with holding up the banner of aces until all sanctum attendees had exited that part of the building. Burke, rescanning all the cubbyholes, but of course failing to look behind the slippers, alone remained. "Hurry up, will you?" the viceroy growled in an undertone. His arms were getting tired. "Where are my shoes?" Burke wailed. "Maybe that recalcitrant bear has them. I don't know," the old man suggested. Norma said nothing, though she knew that wasn't true. Chicken and cheroot. The music on the refurbished hi-fi was Oliver Nelson's Stolen Moments. Dallas Pimiento dumped a couple of thimblefuls of Cholula hot sauce onto his dish as he swooned to the flute of Eric Dolphy. He ate his meal doubly pleasured by its flavor and by its musical accompaniment. He was just lighting up a small cigar as I climbed in through the window. "What a perfect end to a perfect meal," he said to himself, unaware of my entry. "Smoking, Pimiento?" I challenged him. His belly was too full for the swiftest of responses. Still he clambered to his feet appropriately enough. "How did you get in here?" he demanded. I opened the door to the small nook. "You've gotten rid of the painting, I see," I remarked. "What painting?" he said uneasily. "The one that hung here before you replaced it with this shabby Anthony Green knockoff." I chuckled, looking at it. "Is that really how you see yourself in your household?" "Get out of here, Lance," Pimiento snapped. "Who's the little girl?" I asked upon looking closer. "I didn't know you had any children." Pimiento shut the door. The glowing tip of his cheroot was inches from my face. "Let's have it," he said. "I know you want something, so let's hear it." "For starters, I want to know why you're smoking." I walked over to the table and looked down at the remains of his meal. And eating chicken," I indicted him. The bones were there as evidence, picked clean by his ghostly, smoke-corrupted mouth. "Of what business are these things to you, Lance? I know you've got some kind of pull with the ministry. What exactly, I don't know. I wouldn't tolerate you otherwise, but my private life is my own." "Your private life is not as private nor as much your own as you think," I informed him. "Why do you think you painted that picture of me?" "I don't know what picture you're talking about. What I don't understand is why you'd paint me in such a negative light." The Egyptian twist. Originally, it was a soft drink. Some people thought it was a dance. Those people were usually ignorant rednecks from my parents' generation and their wretched, overfed offspring. What the name Egyptian Twist ultimately referred to, however, was a specialty brand of small cigars. Made of shredded papyrus soaked in a secret chemical closely related to one used by the ancient mummification experts, once smoked it delivered a powerful, mnemonically altering agent to the consumer's brain. When that brain happened to belong to a ghost, I had finally admitted to myself what Dallas Pimiento was. The results were wildly unpredictable, sometimes leading to attempts on the part of the user to create tangible examples or representations of the false memories. Grown, manufactured, and packaged in the corollary zone, they were legally obtainable only there. Perhaps Pimento had been there. It would be hard to list all the places he had been. Alternately, he may have purchased the smokes from an underground dealer in such noxious luxuries. All I knew was that he had moved outside my inner circle of intimacy. His work had not yet been affected, but if the bones of that chicken he had eaten could walk, I am sure that they would walk away from him. I couldn't do that. I still had to maintain contact with him, even if it was through the intermediaries of the ministry's organization. I had written a little story that I wanted entered into the files of the antithetical department. I headed down to the secret entrance to the lab, and was surprised to see Bud Shank standing outside the door drinking a can of Coca-Cola. "That stuff is poison," I told him jokingly, though I meant what I said. I started to press the entry code on the keypad. "Who are you?" Shank asked. "I'm Lance Ash." I was stunned. Surely Shank remembered me? Or didn't he? Perhaps he was one of those fellows that I knew through records and documentation, but hadn't actually met. Seeing the name fall far from its target, I showed Shank the story. "I'm the author of this," I said. Shank took the pages in his free hand. "Saucy Escapades," he read aloud. "I've never heard of it." "Well, I guess not," I admitted. "I just wrote it yesterday." I punched in the code. "How do you know the code?" Shank took a sip from his drink. "I wrote that too," I told him before I slipped inside. Saucy Escapades. There was no time to get caught up in a conversation. Sure, I wanted to tell the old man about the condom I had found, but I knew that if I told him, he would launch into a lengthy spiel about morality, changing times, and historical facts that I would not be politely able to break away from before I had to hop on the interstellar ferry. "Did you wash that banana?" asked a different old man, this one quite womanly looking, as I took a seat and began to peel my healthy treat. "I don't wash bananas." I removed the entirety of the peel, that's my style, and held the edible part between two fingers. The peel I wrapped inside a paper towel I had been intelligent enough to bring along. You know you can get high smoking those," the womanly old man pointed out, "but you have to dry them out first." "That's a myth," I countered. I guess my mouth must still have had some fruity pulp within, for my neighbor asked me to repeat what I had said. I did so, more or less. "Oh, yes it is. True. The peel contains a drug called bananidine. It's a mildly psychoactive chemical." I didn't bother to hear the rest. I got up from my seat, though the ferry was already in motion, and made my way down into the bowels of the craft. The corridor I walked along was dark. The smell of onions frying was strong in the air. I heard loud, redneck laughter and the pounding of the walls as if the joke was too wonderful for merely verbal response. Past a length of nearly total darkness, I came to a doorway to my left. Inside was a small room, lit by a single dim bulb. Two short church pews faced each other from two of the walls. On them sat a half-dozen rumpled-looking peasants. I took a seat in the middle of the nearest pew. My new neighbors were a silent bunch. They sat staring at the floor. One dumpy woman of middle age sat sewing something. I took out a small book of poetry, how I longed to call it a slim volume, and began to read. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the man to my left waving a small piece of paper at me. I turned and looked him in the face. Of course, he was an old man. I know that old age is coming for me as well, but I refuse to believe that I will suddenly turn into a nosy windbag as soon as my hair goes completely gray. I refuse to believe a lot of things. I criticize theists when they continue to wallow in lies, but my self-criticism is tempered with more humor. Alright, we'll continue next time.